So today's product review is going to be on the DPM Systems Recoil Reduction Spring Kits. I reached out to DPM because of a few viewer requests I've had, and they were nice enough to send me a couple of spring kits for testing purposes. The ones they sent me were for a 4 1/4 inch 1911 Colt Commander and a 5 inch 1911. Both of them, or a 5 inch government model, I should say. Both of them rated for up to 45 caliber. I'll explain that in a second. They also sent me 2 kits for 9mm handguns, this one being for the Smith & Wesson 5 inch M&P, and this one being for a Generation 1 through 3 Glock Model 19. We're going to go ahead and get to the 9mm stuff in a later video because I feel that to start this product review off, we should use the caliber of handguns, which will exacerbate the positive effects of this particular system. So let me show you what they're all about. So the DPM Recoil Reduction Kit comes in a package that looks like this. It comes with 3 springs, including the one that I've actually taken out of the package already. These 3 springs are different lengths. One of them's kind of a gold color too. The length is relative to their resistance to compression, so the strength of the actual spring. Also comes with a telescoping guide rod. For the 1911, it usually comes with a partial length guide rod. You are now moving to a full length guide rod with the spring cap with the channel in it in order to operate correctly. So the way this would work, you would select the spring relative to your caliber. Relative to your caliber, you'd install it in your handgun, the idea being you will experience a reduction in recoil and faster follow-up shots. The way that this is intended to work is you use the correct stiffness of spring, and as your slide racks back, on your typical conventional guide rod in your 1911, this one in particular is a 5 inch Kimber, which I borrowed from a friend of mine. What would happen is, under normal circumstances, the slide racks back and smacks against the edge of the frame, which is where most of your recoil comes from, and then it reciprocates back forward, strips around out of the magazine, and you're ready to fire the gun again. So the idea with the DPM system is, when you replace your standard guide rod, whether you have a full-length one like this, or you have a partial-length one like my Metro Arms Commander 1911, when you replace it with the full-length telescoping guide rod from DPM, the idea is, as your slide reciprocates, it slows down incrementally. So as you get toward the back, it gets slower and slower and bumps to a careful halt before reciprocating back forward. Now, this will slow down the speed of the action a little bit, however, not enough to inhibit your speed and follow-up shots. As a matter of fact, that reduction in recoil, which is the cause for the effect I just mentioned, is what will affect mostly your ability to follow up with faster shots. So, having said that, I'll go ahead and show you how they're installed. Of course, this one's a full-length guide rod, so I have to use my key to get the stupid thing apart. So, spring and cap come off, or I should say spring and spring bushing is actually what that's called. And then I would simply disassemble this 1911 as I normally would. Although this one, for whatever reason, has always been a little bit difficult. There we go. So, comes apart like normal. And what we have in our typical government model 5 inch 1911 would be, in this case, a full-length guide rod, the standard round wire recoil spring, and the spring bushing. So, what this is replaced with is the telescoping guide rod, the DPM spring, which in this case, out of the 3 that came in the package, you see this is rated for 9mm, 38 Super, and 45 Auto, which means I'm going to use the stiffest of the 3 springs, and the spring guide guide rod bushing that came with the kit. In this case, there's only one option for that guide rod bushing. I'll get to the reason I mentioned that here in a few seconds. But we'll go ahead and assemble this bad boy. Again, you're moving to a full-length guide rod with a channeled spring bushing. And there it is. So, already I can actually feel that this gun is slightly more difficult than it was before to manually reciprocate the action. However, I can actually feel where that guide rod begins to compress right about here towards the end. So this last about 1/2 inch is actually the stiffest part of the action. So, having said that, the best I can read on all the forums before I actually tested these was that the stiffer the spring, if it's rated for multiple calibers like the 1911 variants, the stiffer the spring is or the longer the spring is, the heavier the caliber is meant for. Now, in the case of the 4 1/4 inch 1911, it came with 3 springs and, as you can see, 2 different sizes of bushings. The idea being, with the Commander model, you can select the caliber via the spring, and it correlates with short, medium, and long springs to 9mm, 38 Super, and 45 ACP. And is regarding the longer and shorter spring bushing, or guide rod bushing, I should say. The shorter guide rod bushing, which would make for a lighter action, is intended for light per caliber loads, such as 115 grain 9mm, 185 grain 45 auto. Whereas the longer guide rod bushing correlates to the heavy for caliber loads. In this case, with my Metro Arms variant of my Colt Commander, this particular gun, I shoot 230 grain standard pressure, 45 ACP. So I wound up using the longer guide rod bushing and the heaviest of the 3 springs. So I'm not going to take the full-length guide rod all the way out of this because it looks exactly like the one you saw a second ago. But having said that, that is, I did in fact off camera take these to the range before I filmed this video and make good and sure that the lightest recoil produced by these variable options in these spring kits was in fact the lightest recoil achievable with these handguns, and we are A-OK. Having said that, it's a little bit hard to measure the effect of recoil unless you have some kind of special machine that shows you the grafting. You clamp this into a vise that's wired up to a laptop that shows you kind of the inclinating grafting relative to the force over time experienced during the recoil process of your reciprocating slide handgun. I don't have that sort of technology, and quite frankly, I think there's enough people out there on YouTube doing kind of a boring test, or they're standing in front of like a gridded background and holding their guns and expecting you to decipher which spring gives them the lightest recoil. I don't really believe in that because there's too many human variables, to be honest with you. So I came up with what I believe to be a fair test to decipher not the recoil change of the handgun, but the effect of the lighter recoil and the slower reciprocating slide. So let's get to the range and I'll show you what I came up with. So we're out on the range today. We've got our target set 5 yards away, about 15 feet. I've got both my 1911s on. Hopefully you can see that from the camera angle. What we're going to start off doing, there's really 3 questions we want to answer. Dpm Recoil Technologies has 3 claims to fame: 1, smoother action; 2, reduced recoil; and 3, faster and more accurate follow-up shots. So how could we really measure that? Well, here's what I came up with. At this distance with that shoot and see, what I'm going to do is take each gun and I'm going to fire 2 magazines worth. Each magazine I've loaded with 5 rounds for a total of 10 shots. I'm going to pull the trigger as fast as I can, and I'm going to hold this gun as tight as I can. Using our peak abilities really is a great way to reduce human variables and things like that. What we're going to do is run that with the stock factory recoil spring, and then we're going to use the DPM stuff, and we're going to see what kind of improvements can be made. I'm going to run this test separately with each gun. So, with no further ado, here we go. Okay, so, as you can see, not too bad. I'm going to go ahead and pasty up those shot holes, and I'm going to use the, I'm going to go ahead and put the DPM stuff in, and we're going to run that test again, and we're going to see how we do. So, we've got the DPM system installed. Let's see how we do. Well, aside from a couple of our pasties falling off, which I suppose would be my fault for trying to stick them on in cold weather, was our group any tighter? Well, I'll see if I can't decipher that. I'll get back to you. So we've got the Colt Commander, or I guess Metro Arms Commander, all set up with the stock or factory partial guide rod, recoil spring, and guide rod bushing. So let's see how this stacks up. Well, subjectively, I'd say I did relatively okay for firing as fast as I can, but I am going to tell you that was a heck of a lot of recoil. That gun is legitimately painful to shoot. So let's set it up with the DPM equipment and see if we can't make any improvements. All right, we got the DPM stuff set up in the Commander model. Let's see how we do. This time I learned my lesson. I put up a new shoot and see for you. So, any difference in the performance of follow-up shots, I'll let you guys be the judge based on what you see. Okay, so, just so I don't only fire, 10, 20, 30, 40 rounds on range today, I'm going to go ahead and rattle off every magazine I have with the DPM systems, with both guns. First the 5-inch, next the 4 1/4 Commander. All the magazines are full, the guns are topped off with a +1, so that makes 8, 6, 24, 25, plus 21, 22, 25 plus 22, is 54. So you can see 47 rounds down range as fast as I can do it. Let's see if the DPM systems can reduce some fatigue so that I can keep the shot center mass of our new shoot and see throughout the duration of this firing sequence. I'm also going to stand back to 7 yards. I'll probably be off camera for you guys, so you'll get to see the actual shots popping up. Just be patient between reloads. My hands are a little bit cold today. Having said that, here we go. And firing. Metro Arms Commander. Okay, so what can we learn from all this? Well, I shoot a little bit left to center when my wrists are cold. Also, this gun does not belong to me. The Commander does. This is my actual grandfather's, so. We did all right. All 47 rounds are on target, best I know. 2 flyers, 1 top left, 1 bottom left. Rest of them, all in the 9 ring, mostly. So, having said that, what's my perspective on the DPM recoil reduction springs? Well, again, the 3 questions. Did they reduce recoil? Did they smooth out the action? Did they improve on my ability to follow up with faster shots? I'm going to say yes to all 3. The recoil improvement with these 45 auto traditional type handguns like the 1911, more than likely the pretty much any of the steel hammer fired guns, chambered 45 ACP. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the recoil improvements are going to be much more drastic than, let's say, a 9mm, but we'll see when I do the 9mm video. So recoil reduction, yes. Faster and more accurate follow-up shots. I felt more comfortable firing these guns a little bit faster with the product. Follow-up shots any more accurate? Well, that's going to depend on the shooter and the handgun. Today I'm going to say any accuracy improvements are marginal. However, the follow-up shots for that same level of accuracy, I'm going to say I'm capable of doing it faster. Did it smooth out the action? Well, that's when we get into a little bit of gray area. So, with the 5-inch Kimber, was I able to feel a difference in the actual reciprocating action? Well, keep in mind, this came with a full-length guide rod. We went to another full-length guide rod. The only difference is the triple spring telescoping guide rod, or triple spring system with telescoping guide rod, I should say. So, the action any smoother? No more than factory. However, I will say the impact against the webbing of my right hand while shooting this rapidly was drastically reduced. Having said that, talking about the Commander gun, smoother action. Well, we went from a partial length guide rod to a full length guide rod. I'm going to say this action is actually drastically smoother. I'm going to go out on a limb and say there's actually a substantial difference in how this gun feels. Again, with the this gun's, especially with the reduction of recoil, the harsh repercussion against the webbing of my thumb and forefinger on my right hand drastically reduced. So overall, is the system worth it? Well, if they hadn't sent me these, I'd have paid $150 a whack, and I got marginal improvement on the range. But I do not whatsoever feel fatigued after firing close to 100 rounds today. That having been said, if you're out on the range throwing measurable and hundreds of rounds, either because you're in a training course or because that's your hobby or that's just what you mainly do or because you're an instructor teaching other people, is this system worth it? For 45 caliber handguns, at this point, I'm going to go out on a limb and say yes, it is. Having said that, we're going to get into some modern striker fire guns and much more tolerable calibers like 9mm. That'll be coming up soon, so we'll see what kind of worthwhile results we get from that. But until next time, thanks for watching The Average Marksman, and hopefully these results were satisfactory to you.